There's a line no defendant should ever cross, and Barron Trump crossed it on a Thursday afternoon in my courtroom. At 18, surrounded by Secret Service agents, he stood tall, eyes blazing and threatening with presidential power. "Dismiss these charges," he said, "or you'll find out exactly what my father can do." The room froze. Attorneys gasped. Reporters stopped typing. I'd faced angry defendants before, but never the son of the sitting president wielding the weight of the executive branch like a weapon. What happened next would test the Constitution itself and change Barron Trump's life forever. Barron Trump was 18, but he carried himself like he owned the world. Privileged, entitled, and raised believing that the Trump name was a shield against consequences, he walked into my courtroom as if the law didn't apply to him. Today, however, that facade would be tested. He was charged with assault, destruction of property, and underage drinking. Serious offenses for anyone, even more so for the son of the sitting president. The victim, Michael Chen, a 19-year-old Brown University student, sat quietly in the courtroom, his nose bandaged and his laptop shattered, a stark reminder of what had happened at the Providence party. The party itself had been typical for a Brown sophomore, crowded and chaotic. Barron arrived with a small entourage, designer jacket gleaming, demeanor cocky. A spilled drink, innocent, accidental, triggered a violent reaction. Michael, carrying a cup through the throng, didn't even notice Barron approaching until it was too late. "I'm so sorry," Michael said. "Let me help clean it." But Barron didn't hear apologies. He only saw an affront to his ego. He punched Michael in the face, breaking his nose instantly, then grabbed Michael's laptop, smashing it against the wall. Witnesses described the scene with shock. The room had gone silent, then erupted into chaos as Barron's friends laughed nervously, while others rushed to help Michael. Barron's attorneys tried to downplay the incident, claiming he was under extreme stress, acting impulsively. But the police report was clear, corroborated by multiple witnesses. Michael's injuries, the destroyed laptop, and Barron's own statements made the charges undeniable. Yet nothing in the police report could capture what happened next in court, when Barron tried to use his father's office as a weapon. The courtroom was tense as Barron entered. Secret Service agents flanked him, their presence a visible reminder of the power his family wielded. He strode to the defendant's bench, muttering quietly to his attorneys, a smirk on his face, as if this entire legal process were a game. The regular rules, the weight of law, the very notion of accountability, none of it seemed real to him. He was the son of the president, and in his mind that made him untouchable. Michael Chen sat stiffly, hands folded in his lap, blood still drying on his cheek, watching silently as Barron's arrogance filled the room. He had come here seeking justice, not a political showdown. But today, the courtroom would become more than a venue for a minor assault case. It would become a battleground for the very principle of judicial independence. Even before opening statements, the energy in the room was palpable. Reporters jostled for position, cameras clicked, and everyone, judges, attorneys, Secret Service, and spectators, felt the weight of what was about to unfold. Barron's presence wasn't just a challenge to law, it was a question posed to the entire system. Could a judge enforce the law when faced with the son of the sitting president? Could the Constitution withstand raw, unchecked power? And then it began. The attorneys made their motions, but it was clear that the real confrontation wouldn't be about legal technicalities. It would be about Barron himself, his arrogance, his belief that privilege equaled immunity, and the shocking threat he would soon make that no judge in America had ever faced before. This was no ordinary case. What started as a party fight over a spilled drink had become a test of democracy itself, a collision between entitlement and the rule of law. And in that moment, everyone in the room, witnesses, attorneys, law enforcement, and even the press, felt the tension of history pressing down on a small municipal courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island. The tension in the courtroom grew as I prepared to hear Barron Trump's motions. At 18, he still carried the brash confidence of youth, but today, that confidence was about to collide with the full weight of the law. As his attorneys argued, Barron leaned back in his chair, smirking, whispering to his aides, and scanning the courtroom as if daring someone to challenge him. He wasn't just a defendant, he was the president's son, and in his mind, that gave him power no judge could touch. When I denied the motion to dismiss the charges, the courtroom shifted. Barron straightened, brushing off his attorney's attempts to restrain him. Then he spoke, and the words froze the room. "Judge Caprio, you need to understand something. My father is the President of the United States. He can make phone calls that change lives. Dismiss these charges or you'll find out exactly what presidential power means. The effect was instantaneous. Secret Service agents glanced nervously at one another. Reporters stopped typing. Attorneys gaped, some grasping their heads in disbelief. This wasn't just a threat. It was a direct challenge to the independence of the judiciary made openly by the son of the sitting president. For 17 minutes, the room seemed to hold its breath. Barron's lead attorney, Theodore Lawson, tried to contain the damage. Your Honor, he's under extreme stress. He didn't mean to threaten the court. But I had heard the words. I had heard the arrogance, the belief that executive power could shield him from accountability. Counselor, I said calmly, my client threatened me with presidential retaliation. That is a crime. Sit down. Barron's smirk faltered, but only slightly. He leaned forward, speaking louder now, almost challenging me. My father protects his family. You're making a decision about whether you want to be someone he protects or someone he doesn't. Every eye in the courtroom was fixed on him. Every heartbeat seemed louder. This wasn't a minor courtroom squabble anymore. It was a test of constitutional boundaries. The Secret Service agents shifted uneasily. Their job was to protect Barron's physical safety, not to shield him from lawful arrests. I could feel the weight of history in that moment. No judge had ever faced such a blatant display of executive intimidation from the child of a sitting president. The room crackled with tension, the kind that makes reporters stop, witnesses lean forward, and attorneys freeze mid-breath. I rose slowly, keeping my voice calm but deadly precise. Mr. Trump, you have one opportunity to retract that statement and apologize to this court. If you do so, we will proceed with your criminal case. If you do not, I will hold you in contempt and add charges for witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. Barron looked at his attorneys, desperation flashing across his face. Their hands shook, shaking their heads in silent pleas. But when he looked back at me, his response was chilling. I'm not apologizing. My father runs this country. You think you matter? One call from him and you're done. Dismiss the charges or you'll regret it. The courtroom erupted. Reporters typed frantically. Secret Service agents spoke urgently into radios. Attorneys scrambled to contain the chaos, and I realized in that instant that the next move would define whether America's Constitution could withstand direct threats from the executive branch through the hands of a teenager. Barron's actions had escalated a simple assault case into a constitutional crisis. Every person in that courtroom, from the victim to the press to the law enforcement officers, understood it. This was more than a fight over spilled drinks or broken laptops. This was about the rule of law itself, and whether even the most powerful family in the country could believe they were above it. Could feel the weight of the courtroom pressing down as I made my decision. Barron Trump had crossed a line no defendant should ever cross. Threatening a judge with presidential power was not only contemptuous, it was criminal. The air was electric, the kind that makes everyone lean in knowing something unprecedented was about to happen. I stood slowly, my voice steady, and addressed Barron directly. Officer D'Angelo, take Mr. Trump into custody for criminal contempt of court, witness intimidation, and threatening a judicial officer. Barron froze. His arrogance faltered. You can't arrest me. I have Secret Service protection, he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. I looked at the lead Secret Service agent who had clearly never been in this situation before. Agents, your duty is to protect Mr. Trump from threats to his physical safety, not shield him from lawful arrest. If you interfere, you will be charged with obstruction of justice. Step aside. A tense 30 seconds passed. Agents whispered into their radios, the room holding its collective breath. Then, one by one, they stepped back. Barron's confidence, once towering, began to crumble. You can't do this. My father, he'll... I cut him off, voice calm but resolute. What, Mr. Trump? Use presidential power to obstruct justice? That would be illegal, potentially an impeachable offense. Step aside and comply with lawful orders. Barron's attorney, Theodore Lawson, rose frantically. Your Honor, I request an immediate recess. This situation has escalated beyond control. No, I said, my tone firm. Your client threatened me with presidential retaliation. That is a crime. He is being arrested. Officer D'Angelo moved forward, and Barron's facade shattered. His tall, imposing figure suddenly seemed small and vulnerable. He glanced around desperately, eyes darting to the Secret Service, his attorneys, anyone who could save him. "You're violating my rights. My father will hear about this." I remained unshaken. "I am aware of your father's position. That does not give you the right to threaten a judicial officer in open court. You committed crimes here. You will face the consequences." The orange jumpsuit awaited him in the holding area. As Officer D'Angelo secured the handcuffs, Barron's voice cracked. More child than entitled air. "This is illegal. You can't." "Yes, I can," I replied. "You threaten the judiciary. You are in custody until trial. No special privileges, no exemptions. The law applies equally to all." The courtroom remained silent, stunned by what had just unfolded. Reporters typed furiously, capturing every word. Secret Service agents hovered nearby, ensuring his safety but respecting the authority of the court. Barron's attorneys sank into their chairs, faces pale, realizing the gravity of what had just occurred. Even Michael Chen, the victim, watched quietly, his injury still fresh, witnessing the extraordinary assertion of law over privilege. Justice was not delayed, nor was it deferred. In that moment, the Constitution itself had been defended. Barron's threats of presidential interference were neutralized by the simple, unwavering fact: no person, not even the son of the president, could stand above the law. The arrest was swift, decisive, and unprecedented, setting a standard that would ripple through the nation. The tension lingered long after Barron was led away. The courtroom had witnessed history, a confrontation between youthful arrogance and the enduring strength of the American legal system. And in that silence, a clear message was sent: the rule of law is not negotiable, and judicial independence will be defended, even against the highest power in the land. Within an hour, the story of Barron Trump's arrest had gone viral. Every major news outlet, cable network, and social media platform carried the shocking headline, "President's son arrested in court for threatening judge." The nation was stunned. Reporters dissected every moment of the courtroom drama, replaying the footage of Barron's threats and his abrupt handcuffing. The White House press corps swarmed, demanding answers, while commentators debated the unprecedented clash between executive influence and judicial authority. It wasn't just a story, it was a constitutional event unfolding live across America. President Trump, meanwhile, was furious. Within hours, he tweeted accusations, bias, calling the arrest illegal and labeling the judge a rogue official targeting his family. Supporters rallied online, while opponents warned of the dangers of presidential interference. The nation was polarized, but everyone agreed on one thing: no president's child had ever been arrested under such circumstances, and the implications were enormous. Back in the courtroom, the fallout continued. The Secret Service had maintained their protective role without obstructing the arrest, a delicate balance that demonstrated the limits of executive reach. Congressional aides began calling judicial offices. Legal scholars offered commentary, and the FBI was looped in for federal implications. The simple act of arresting Barron Trump had become a flashpoint in the broader discussion of separation of powers. Michael Chen, the victim, became a reluctant symbol of accountability. While the nation focused on Barron's arrest and the constitutional implications, his story reminded everyone of the human cost. A spilled drink, a moment of youthful negligence, had escalated into physical assault and property destruction. Barron's threats had overshadowed the initial crime, but for Michael, justice remained personal and immediate. Amid the chaos, lawyers debated strategy. Some argued the arrest would trigger a legal battle over presidential immunity, while others emphasized the precedent it set for future cases. The line between state and federal jurisdiction blurred, raising questions about how far executive power could extend when it collided with independent courts. Every legal commentator, from professors to former judges, weighed in, dissecting the events minute by minute. The tension reached its peak when reports surfaced that President Trump was considering using executive clemency for his son, even for state charges, a move that was legally impossible but symbolically threatening. Congressional leaders discussed potential impeachment implications if any interference occurred. Public discourse swelled, protests, opinion columns, and social media debates surged, all centered on one question: could the Constitution withstand direct intimidation by the executive branch through a family member? Meanwhile, in the Rhode Island courthouse, life was surreal. Jurors, attorneys, and law enforcement officers adjusted to the fact that the trial now carried national weight. The simple assault case had morphed into a landmark moment in American history. Every action, every statement, every glance from Barron and his attorneys would be scrutinized. Even small procedural steps, from bail hearings to motions, were magnified in the court of public opinion. The courtroom itself had become a symbol. Its walls, once ordinary, now represented the front line in the defense of judicial independence. Each person present, officers, reporters, attorneys, and the victim, understood that the events of that day would echo far beyond Providence. The arrest of the president's son was not just about Barron Trump, it was about whether the rule of law could withstand power, privilege, and threats from the highest office in the nation. As I sat at my bench, the weight of responsibility was clear. The law was being tested not by abstract arguments, but by an 18-year-old wielding the perceived might of the presidency. Every choice I made would set a precedent, and every word I spoke would be scrutinized. The story was no longer local. It was national, constitutional, and historic. And yet, amidst the chaos, one fact remained undeniable. The law would not bow, and justice would not be intimidated. 3 days after the arrest, Barron Trump appeared in court for his bail hearing, and the tension was palpable. The courtroom, already etched into history, now braced for the next scene. After his attorneys filed motions to dismiss the expanded charges, claiming judicial bias and arguing that his arrest proved prejudice. But I was unwavering. "Mr. Lawson," I said firmly, "your client threatened me with presidential retaliation. That is not bias, that is criminal behavior, and it must be addressed." Every word I spoke reinforced the principle that no one, not even the son of the sitting president, could bypass the law. Barron sat in the orange jumpsuit, head lowered, the arrogance that once filled him replaced by a mixture of fear and disbelief. He had been remanded into custody without bail. His previous belief that the Trump name granted immunity was crumbling. The courtroom, once tense with uncertainty, now watched a transformation, privilege confronted by accountability. I outlined the expanded charges: criminal contempt of court, witness intimidation, threatening a judicial officer, and obstruction of justice. These were not symbolic. They were a direct response to the unprecedented threats he had made. The victim, Michael Chen, remained present, quietly observing. His calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Barron's shaken presence. Michael's story of being punched, kicked, and having his laptop destroyed remained the heart of the case. It was a stark reminder that while the constitutional implications dominated headlines, real harm had been done, and justice for the victim was paramount. Michael had been brave, documenting the assault, and his evidence formed the backbone of the prosecution. As the hearing continued, the implications of presidential interference became clear. Barron's attorneys tried to argue that any action against him could provoke political retaliation. I addressed this head-on. Threatening judicial officers with executive power is a crime. If anyone attempts to interfere, it will be referred immediately to Congress and federal authorities. The law applies equally to all, regardless of position or family connections. The courtroom, filled with reporters and legal observers, understood the significance. The arrest and charges were a defense of the Constitution itself. Barron's body language told the story of a young man confronted with consequences for the first time. He avoided eye contact, slouched in the chair, and muttered apologies under his breath. He had spent 18 years watching his father leverage power, assuming that influence meant immunity. Today, he learned the stark truth. Power does not override the law. His arrogance had been replaced by fear, and his threats, once brazen, now seemed small and desperate. I concluded the hearing by emphasizing the principle at stake. This is not personal. This is about the rule of law. Threatening a judge, intimidating witnesses, obstructing justice. These actions cannot go unpunished. Justice is not optional, and no one is exempt. The courtroom, from attorneys to spectators, absorbed the gravity of the moment. This was a lesson in accountability, privilege, and constitutional limits. The hearing ended, and Barron was escorted back to the holding facility. For Michael Chen, the victim, it was reassurance that justice would be served. For the nation, it was a clear message. Judicial independence could withstand threats, even from the highest office. The impact was immediate. Legal scholars, politicians, and media commentators praised the firmness of the court. The rule of law had been defended without compromise. By the end of the day, the narrative was clear. Barron Trump had been held accountable, and in doing so, the Constitution had been protected. Privilege and power could not intimidate justice, and the precedent set would echo far beyond Providence. America had witnessed an extraordinary moment where law triumphed over influence, and the lesson was unmistakable. No one, not even the president's son, is above the law. 6 weeks later, Barron Trump pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced 2-year sentence, with credit for time served. Michael Chen received $50,000 in restitution, his laptop and injuries acknowledged in full. The constitutional crisis ended as President Trump's attorneys were advised that any interference would trigger obstruction charges. 1 year later, Barron wrote from prison, apologizing for his threats and acknowledging the lesson: no power, no family name, no presidency can place anyone above the law. Judicial independence had been defended, the Constitution upheld, and America had witnessed the triumph of law over privilege.